The Ulster and Delaware Railroad was a railroad located in the state of New York. It was often advertised as the only all-rail route to the Catskill Mountains. At its greatest extent, the U&amp extended from Kingston Point on the Hudson River, through the Catskill Mountains to its western terminus at Oneonta, passing through the counties of Ulster, Delaware, Schoharie and Otsego. History. Rondout and Otsego Railroad. During the early 19th century, waterways formed the principal transportation network in New York. An important point on this network was Rondout, located at the confluence of Rondout Creek and the Hudson River. In 1828 it became the eastern terminus of the Delaware and Hudson Canal. Here, cargo and passengers were transferred from canal boats to the larger vessels navigating the Hudson. By the end of the Civil War, railroads were preempting waterways as the preferred method of transportation. Thomas Cornell, founder of the Cornell Steamboat Company and a resident of Rondout, was among those who noticed. Although Cornell made plenty of money from shipping, he planned a railroad that would bring supplies from towns in central or western New York to his port in Rondout. Sir Cornell chartered the Rondout and Otsego on April 3, 1866, with himself as the first president. With the work of surveying and acquiring rights of way completed, construction started in 1868. Cornell decided to construct this new railroad of 62 and 70-pound rail. It would go from Rondout to the busy city of Oneonta on the upper Susquehanna River, and then to Otsego on the shore of Lake Ontario. The U&amp, at 12 miles long, reached the summer vacation resort of Olive Branch near the town of Schoharie on September 30, 1869. By the next year, the first train was run and the railroad was finally operational. In 1870 the railroad was extended to Phoenicia, where the railroad built a stucco station across Esopus Creek from the village. The same year, ownership of the railroad was transferred to John C. Brodhead and the line reached the small town of Big Indian. By 1871 construction reached Dean's Corners. However, the U&amp folded upon completing construction to Roxbury, and the task of constructing the remainder of the route was left to its newly organized successor, the New York, Kingston and Amp, Syracuse. It was a successful railroad, with plenty of passengers coming from surrounding towns and larger cities. Steamboat passengers could dock at Rondout and transfer to the railroad. Later, passengers could also transfer at Kingston, first via the Walkill Valley Railroad, then via the West Shore Railroad, and much later via the New York, Ontario and Western Railway. For the boats, it was a short walk to the U&amp station to transfer to the train. Freight was also very well handled. Much of the freight income was made from coal shipped along the U&amp Canal from the Music Mountains near Carbondale, Pennsylvania, to the port at Rondout. There were also vegetables, fruit, and milk from the farms in the Catskills. While steadily grading to Mooresville, the great number of curves and grades created a problem, as more digging, ties and rails meant greater costs to complete the remainder of the railroad. The railroad couldn't make enough money to pay the debt and continue building the railroad. So in 1872 Cornell appointed John A. Greene to be president pro tempore for a period of 10 years. Greene was expected to have the railroad finished to the town of Oneonta by 1874, pay all of the debts, and withstand future debts of as much as $700,000. However, the railroad was slowly losing money and eventually had to reduce service before going bankrupt in 1872. Later that year, it was reorganized as the New York, Kingston and Syracuse Railroad to continue with the project. New York, Kingston and Syracuse Railroad. After the Rondat and Otsego Railroad became bankrupt in 1872, it was quickly reorganized as the New York, Kingston and Syracuse Railroad, directed by George Sharp. The plan of extending to Otsego was now omitted, and the new plan was to extend to Oneonta and make a sharp turn north to Earlville, where the line would make a connection with the recently constructed Syracuse and Chenango Valley Railroad. Construction of the railroad had begun immediately, and the railroad was extending very quickly. As of 1872, it had already reached the towns of Roxbury, Gilboa, and Stamford, with the first train arriving in the village of Stamford late that year. This increased service provided the first real rail route into the Catskill Mountains, benefiting both passenger and freight customers. The railroad was further benefited by the many connections to other railroads, enabling passengers from as far away as New York City to visit the Catskills. Another boon to business was a ferry that ran across the Hudson to Rondat from Rhinebeck, with the Rhinebeck and Connecticut Railroad and New York Central and Hudson River Railroad station connecting the cities of Hartford, Connecticut, Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston, Massachusetts, to the region. The town of Kingston, New York was profitable to the railroad due to the large number of industries of the area, including cement, concrete, bricks and bluestone. Kingston was also a popular passenger stop, as people would rely on the railroad to take them around the Catskills to jobs at mills and small factories. Although this prosperity seemed good, there was bad news as well. The U&amp still wasn't profitable enough to avoid bankruptcy, so in 1873, the U&amp designated the Farmers Loan and Trust Company as trustee for the first mortgage bondholders of the railroad. While this helped for a brief time, it was only another 2 years until even the trustee finally couldn't manage the railroad's problems. The railroad became bankrupt in 1875 and was sold by foreclosure to the bank. It was reorganized as the Ulster and Delaware Railroad later that year. Ulster and Delaware Railroad, Stony Clove and Catskill Mountain Railroad. Cornell got the idea for another railroad that would start at the U&amp Junction in Phoenicia and go up along the Stony Clove Valley to the bustling village of Hunter. He decided to name it the Stony Clove and Catskill Mountain Railroad. Unlike the U&amp, it would utilize a 3-foot narrow gauge, which theoretically would be cheaper to build and operate. Construction started on the railroad during 1881, with Cornell's son-in-law, Samuel Decacoy Kendall, supervising construction. Originally planned as a summer-only operation serving the Ulster County communities of Phoenicia and Chichester, and the Greene County villages of Lanesville, Edgewood, and Hunter, the service was expanded to year-round operation. In addition to the major stations, there was a flag stop at Stony Clove Notch and a station between the Notch and Hunter called Catskill Junction Station. At the junction of the Catskill Railway, the difference in gauge between the U&amp D and SC-in-amp CM caused difficulties in transferring rolling stock from the main line. So, in 1882, the two companies installed a Ramsey cart transfer apparatus in the yard at Phoenicia. This device allowed the standard gauge equipment to be run on the narrow gauge line. With the apparatus, the transfer only required about 8 minutes, saving the railroads much time and money. Industries on this line included the William O. Schwarzwalder furniture factory in the company-owned hamlet of Chichester. Other large companies included the Fenwick Lumber Company in Edgewood and the Horatio Lockwood and Amp Company furniture factory in Hunter. The railroad was acquired by the U&amp in 1892, and these industries now had a new railroad to transport the products. Present condition: Ulster County starting at Kingston Point, milepost 0. The Trolley Museum of New York operates the remaining trackage in Kingston east of the CS6 River line, up to about milepost 2.4. The line in this section is owned by the City of Kingston and leased to the Trolley Museum. The Trolley Museum emphasizes the preservation of the use of trolleys and restoration of the former U&amp yard. It built a new engine house and shop in 1987, and the idea of rebuilding the utility building and the station has been suggested. The museum currently operates from MP0 Kingston Point to MP1 Roundabout Yard, with a branch along the Strand. The track from MP 2.4 to 2.8 has been removed and the right-of-way sold to private parties. The line easements for railroad purposes from Kingston to the Delaware County line are owned by Ulster County, which acquired them from Penn Central in 1979 in lieu of back taxes. The Catskill Mountain Railroad leases this portion from Ulster County for tourist operations between Phoenicia and Cold Brook Station. Trackage between Kingston and Cold Brook was cleared of debris, and is being upgraded between Kingston and Phoenicia. The line is in service from Kingston Plaza to the Hurley Flats Bridge and from MP 21.3 to 27.9. The Catskill Mountain Railroad commenced operations in Kingston in December 2008. One bridge in need of repair separates the two ends of the railroad at MP 21.3. On August 28, 2011, Bridge C30 was washed away due to flooding from Hurricane Irene, severing the Phoenicia operation from the Kingston operation for the time being. The line between Phoenicia and Highmount, also leased by the Catskill Mountain Railroad, is isolated by 6 washouts west of Phoenicia, and has not supported a train since regular service ended on October 2, 1976. However, a 2.5-mile section of the line between Giggle Hollow and Highmount was cleared of debris in 2006. Another section from Big Indian to Shandaken was cleared in 2009. Delaware County: The U&amp currently operates tourist trains from Highmount to Roxbury. U&amp operations are limited to the Arkville-Roxbury section as the line to Highmount is out of service due to a weak bridge abutment east of Arkville. In Roxbury, the Roxbury station is being restored by the Ulster and Delaware Railroad Historical Society. Roxbury is the birthplace of railroad Baron J. Gould. The Ulster and Delaware Railroad Historical Society owns former New York, Ontario and Western Railway bobber caboose number 8206, built at the NYO and W Middletown shops in 1906, and former BEDT 14 and H.K. Porter Inc. Locomotive Works 060T steam locomotive built in August 1920 at the facility in Pittsburgh. Both are presently being restored by the Society. The Delaware County Rail from Highmount to Bloomville, a distance of 45 miles, is owned by the Catskill Revitalization Corporation. The track ends at Hubble Corners, where it becomes the Catskill Scenic Trail. In Delaware County, the Halcottville station MP 53.0 was severed, with the passenger side moved a few hundred feet, where it serves as a shed on private property, and the freight side moved to Arkville, where it is now a tool shed for U&amp. Both the Arkville and Fleischmann stations have been razed, but the freight houses have survived. U&amp uses the Arkville Freight House as its passenger station. The Kelly's Corners station was acquired by NYSDOT in 1964 and bulldozed during the reconstruction of State Route 30. The station at Stamford has been restored and is owned by the CRC, owners of U&amp, and used for offices. The stations at South Courtrai, MP 81.5, East Meredith, MP 97.9, and Davenport Centre, MP 103.2, are currently private dwellings, with the railbed in front of them also being privately owned. Interstate 88 was planned during the 1970s to extend from Schenectady to Binghamton, New York, although the original plans suggested that it extend to New England and near the Atlantic coast. The portion that was constructed covers a portion of the U&amp D's railbed in the town of Oneonta, where it connects with New York State Route 28. Schoharie County. The South Gilboa Station, MP 70.6, is the only station on the remainder of the U&amp D, and it is in poor condition. It is still in its original spot between the Delaware County stations of Grand Gorge and Stamford. The old right-of-way in front of it is part of the Catskill Scenic Trail. It is also one of two U&amp D railroad stations that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Town of Gilboa Historical Society has proposed that the South Gilboa station should have a full cosmetic restoration. However, this is only a proposal, and it is unknown whether or not it will occur. Otsego County. The final station at Oneonta, MP 106.9, was part of a tourist line called the Delaware and Otsego Railroad that was created soon after that portion was abandoned during the late 1960s. It ran trains from Oneonta Station to a bridge that crossed Charlotte Creek a little way from the old site of the West Davenport Station. It is currently a pub-restaurant called The Depot. The line from Bloomville, MP 86.2, to Oneonta, MP 107, was abandoned in 1965, with rails removed in 1967, and is currently owned by private owners. Greene County. The Greene County portion of the branches, which were torn up in 1940, along with the smaller portion of the branches in Ulster County, remain as overgrown paths and bridge abutments, with an occasional road covering the right-of-way. New York State Route 214 overlaps the former alignment at Stony Clove Notch. However, a 2-mile section of the line from Bloomer Road to Clum Hill Road in Tannersville has been converted into a rail trail, known locally as the Huckleberry Trail. There are also a few bridge piers, such as one on the southern side of Esopus Creek in Phoenicia, one in Chichester, and two in Edgewood. There are only two surviving stations on what used to be the branches. The Hunter Station, branch MP 2.5, is now a private dwelling. The Haynes Falls Station, branch MP 18.5, is currently the headquarters of the Mountaintop Historical Society. Narrow gauge rolling stock, U&amp, CM locomotives, Catskill Railroad locomotives, narrow gauge coaches. The coaches that ran on the narrow gauge division had been built by Jackson and Amp Sharp Co. in 1881 and 1883. Between August 1899 and June 1900, they were sold to F.M. Hicks and Amp Co. of Chicago, Illinois. In May 1901, Hicks resold 4 of the coaches to the White Pass and Yukon route. Under White Pass ownership, these cars have been rebuilt several times. They remain in operation. After all of the rebuildings under White Pass ownership, about all that remains of the original cars of the architecture and the superstructure frames. Gallery. Bibliography. Best, Gerald M. The Ulster and Delaware Railroad through the Catskills. San Marino, CA, Golden West Books, ISBN 9780870950414.